Hey, everybody. As you know, my name is Gay Lisby. I just want to rejoice with you just for a minute and reflect on how sometimes way leads on to way. Sometimes there are situations and circumstances that come up in your life, and you're asked to make a decision. You don't really have all the information, but you're asked to make a decision. And somehow you feel compelled to make a yes decision, and you don't really understand why. Maybe it doesn't even financially make sense. And I'm reflecting back in 2012 when I realized that my marriage was, I think it was 2012, 2011, when my marriage, it was revealed that it wasn't what I thought it was. I'm a writer, and I had written a lot of the lines that turned out they weren't shared by my husband. It's a heartbreaking thing when you go through that kind of time and you have to say, how do I reframe my whole life? How do I move past this and go on? And sometimes opportunities come to us and we're in a place where we have to say, it just doesn't make sense that I'm saying yes to this, but somehow I just feel compelled to say yes. And it was 2013, I believe, when I was reacquainted with a young man that I had known when he was a teenager. And then he got married and grew and went away, and then reacquainted with him online. I was going through a very difficult time after the marriage ended, and I was also very sick. And I was having these mysterious seizures. I'd never had anything like that in my life before, and it was incredibly confusing time for me. I really felt like, maybe God couldn't hear me anymore. Maybe he didn't want to hear from me anymore. Maybe a failed marriage was the place where he says, gosh, Gay, you swore an oath and you didn't keep the oath. Regardless of whether my husband kept the oath or not, that's how I put it on myself. And so it was during this time of really critical weakness in my life that I'm looking at the computer day after day, and I'm living in the spare room of my sister's house. And I'm like, how can this thing make me money? I didn't know very much about online, e-com, anything like that. And I ended up doing a multi-level marketing project with this young man named Zach. And I didn't know anything about multi-level marketing. I just sort of followed along behind him. And as time went on, I made a little bit of money, a little pocket of money. And one of the things that happened during that period of time was I was able to regain my confidence, because one of the things that was required of me was to sit in front of the camera and present in Zoom meetings or whatever to people that might be interested in the business opportunity. And I just really felt this rebuild the confidence in myself that I needed to try to move forward and try to make a place for myself in the world. My children were all grown, thank God for that. And in fact, I think I had already had my first grandchild at that point. My children were all out of college and living on their own. And it was just me trying to figure things out, thankfully Colleen, letting me live in her spare room, and she was still teaching at the time. So in a big way, I kind of was living off of her. I didn't find out until many years later that from time to time, she would put little pockets of money in my bank account. I was sick often and didn't really know which end was up. But as I moved into the MLM projects with Zach, I began to recover. I began to be restored in my mind and in my spirit. And none of it made any sense, it just seemed like I was almost compelled to do it. There would be a MLM project come up and I'd be like, I don't even have the money to join that, but I would just be compelled. And I realized now, as I look back, it was more that I was compelled to follow after him because there were things that I needed to learn. There were things that needed to be healed inside of me. And in a big part, his affirmation of me and his acceptance of me as a young man doing business and raising his family was kind of a way of affirming me. My children were very confused at the time. They were grown and they were very confused. And because a marriage is a very complex and a very private thing, I couldn't disclose to them everything. And of course, Steve wouldn't disclose to them everything. And so a lot of it got sort of lumped on me that, because I was the one who physically actually packed my bags and left the house. So somehow, I had failed. But Zach's confirmation of me and affirmation of me was vitally important to my recovery. I was just looking at it as business, but I didn't realize there was so much more happening in my life at that time until I was able to look back and reflect, now years later. I realized also that this pathway led me to an MLM project where part of, or the essence of the product was how to sell on eBay and how to sell on Amazon. And Zach opened up the product and he learned it. I was starting to do some caregiving at the time for elderly people. It was a pace that I could keep up with. And he was opening the training and he was learning how to do it. And he was going gangbusters. At that time, I was like, I just can't learn anything more. I'm tapped out, and I didn't open that. But over a period of time, his insistence, okay, you got to do this, made me open that training and try. And as I tried, I realized that there were other people who were coming into my life that I was compelled to try to come alongside of or try to make myself in some way valuable to them. And I remember at one time, we were doing really well in our Amazon selling at this point. And I think this might have been the year that we paid off our mortgage in 1 year. Nathan Slammons called and he said, I have an opportunity. We're going to do with another couple guys, we're going to do a joint conference and we're going to teach the PL part of it. And the other guys are going to teach the wholesale part of it. And would you guys be interested? And all that didn't make any sense at all. Colleen and I both said yes. And it was $4,000 each to go. That was the ticket price. So then there was the travel cost and et cetera, et cetera. And all I knew was these guys knew PL and the other guys knew wholesale, and they had some sales records, that they were showing results of their activities. And I felt confident that they were telling me the truth. And so even though financially it didn't make sense, we responded and we traveled to the Cumberland Gap region of Kentucky at that time. And we had this conference. I remember when Andy and Nathan and Leron Hirschkorn walked in to the dining area at that conference. And I remember I immediately went over and hugged them. They didn't know me from a cake of soap. They had never met me face to face before. And I just walked over and hugged him and just greeted him and thanked them. When I sat down, I thought, I was pretty forward, And I do remember they had kind of this embarrassed look on their face. Like, what was that all about? But for some reason, I was compelled. And it turned out that a couple of years later, I would end up in partnership with these guys as we founded and formed what has become Amazon Seller Tribe. You see, there are times when you make investments that you rationally think through and you're like, this really makes sense, but somehow you're compelled to do it. And it's because there's so much more behind that. You can't see it at the moment. You can't even comprehend or understand it at the moment, but you just move into it because you're compelled to. And we know that happens over and over again in Amazon Seller Tribe. And so many different connections have been made with people. We've connected with so many people, other people connecting with each other in Tribe, and opportunities open and doors opening all around because you were somehow compelled to push that button, make that subscription or buy that opportunity. And I remember when Nathan called us that day and talked about the opportunity that we would have to learn private label from them and wholesale from the other guys. And I remember that. And I remember thinking, even kind of looking on Colleen's face and, she's a little more fear-based. I'm a little more greed-based, and so kind of looking on her face and she's kind of like, whoa, $8,000, no. But I was saying yes. And she had confidence in me at that time. I had confidence in moving into that moment. I didn't fully understand it. But since that time, that relationship, that opportunity, that door of opportunity that was open to me to be there and to meet them face to face and listen to them and support them and come alongside of them has caused me to have many, many more opportunities in business than I could ever have hoped or dreamed. And so I'm just speaking this to you today, right now. Sometimes when you feel that compulsion to make that move, it might not make sense in the beginning. It might be like, that doesn't necessarily compute, but just know that many times there's much more behind that you can't see or you don't know, or maybe you're not even ready for it at that exact moment, but you will be a week from now, a month from now. And when you open yourself up to that opportunity, then amazing things can happen, and amazing things can happen in other people's lives. I look back on it and I think to myself, what if we hadn't gone to that conference in the Cumberland Gap region of Corbin, Kentucky at that time, and met face to face with Nathan Slammons, Andy Slammons, and it was Leah Ron Hirschkorn at the time as well. There would be no possible way that we would have now this vision to help create the most seven-figure sellers in the industry. No possible way, because I wouldn't have made that connection. Now, the same could be said. A story could be told from Gary Ray's side of how he made connection with me and how that began to evolve into an opportunity for both of us to link arms and provide for you the very best opportunity for you to grow your Amazon business. We don't know everything, but we know a lot of things. And we've been on this trail quite a long time now. And we've been through a lot in our lives. Gary and I have probably more years behind us than we do ahead of us. And with that has come a lot of experiences that prove to us when you have that compelling move into it, may not be apparent immediately. It may not on the surface make sense, but move into it because you just don't know but what you've opened this tremendous door of opportunity to yourself that revolutionizes your life. And as it turns out, it actually revolutionized my heart. Because working with guys the caliber of Gary Ray and Andy Slammons and Nathan Slammons has caused my heart now to be healed. I don't look at men as potential betrayers, or in the case of my father, he was an abuser. I don't look at men in that way anymore in general, because these three guys have caused me to view things differently. I had no idea when I was moving through that door of opportunity that all these sorts of things would happen in my life, that my finances would change magnificently, that my business would grow exponentially, and that my heart and my mind would be changed. And a part of me would be healed that might not have been healed any other way. I think about those things. So when you're presented with a door of opportunity, consider that. Before you just sit down and say, let me just see if this makes logical sense. Wait a minute, get still for a minute and say, why do I feel kind of compelled to move into this? What does this mean? We may not know it completely and altogether in the beginning, but I guarantee you there could be something bigger, faster, stronger, better, more profitable, more beautiful, more emotionally fulfilling than anything you've seen before. At least it was the case with me. And I've heard many, many testimonies of Amazon Seller Tribe members and realized it was the case with them as well. Well, I'm Gay Lisby, and hopefully something I've said today has been a blessing to your life. Thank you.